David, in the second part of this book, you and Mike dive deep into this forgotten discipline of fasting. In fact, this part takes up the majority of the book, where you guys go through and you define what fasting is. You share Jesus' example about how to fast. You explain some different types of fasts. And then you give some really nice tips and tools on how all of us can just jump in and practice this discipline. But in your opinion, David, why is the discipline of fasting so neglected today?
There are two things, Tom, in terms of a good response to your question. First of all, it's really important to note that fasting took a really bad rap back during the Middle Ages connected to the church. People fasted to an extreme. There are records that show us that people fasted in the Middle Ages as a show to God right up to the point of death. And then they would start eating again. And people stood and saw that, and that was such a turn off to them that during that time, just the discipline of fasting really began to leave the church scene. The other thing that I would mention is simply that fasting is not part of our culture. It really isn't. As a matter of fact, quite the opposite. Fulfilling every need as quickly as possible kind of is sometimes what Americans are into. So for those two reasons, fasting is not been a part of the American church or the American culture as well across the board. I would say that fasting is important, however, for every single believer to look at and to consider, mainly because of the fact that fasting is a gift that God gives us that stretches us maybe like no other discipline stretches us. It takes us deeper. It helps us clarify our thinking, and really is an amazing time, if you do it correctly, of drawing close to the Lord and really being in His presence. The other thing about fasting, Tom, that's important is that to think about genuinely seeing a Holy Spirit revival here in our country and in other countries. I don't know of any record at all that tells that a revival ever came without the disciplines of prayer and fasting. So my great encouragement to everyone who's watching our presentation today is that if you have fasted, let me just encourage you to keep up the good work and keep practicing that discipline. The more you fast, the better you will become at it. The other thing, in addition to that, is simply that those of you who have maybe not started fasting yet, that you would take a time, an opportunity to read the book and especially look at this one section. There's a piece in there that tells you, if you've never fasted before, this piece will tell you how to step by step slowly begin and work your way into becoming a really effective person who practices the fast. It's just so important to know that fasting brings power to the church. Fasting brings power to our prayers and power to the church. And I just see the day when there is a huge field of people who are praying regularly and building the fast into their spiritual journey. And I believe that if there were hundreds of thousands of us participating in the kind of prayer we're talking about here and the fasting event, that I promise you, we would get God's attention in terms of asking Him to show up and to do things that we have never ever seen before in our lives. So a slow start, learning how to handle a fast, how to do it correctly, practicing it on a regular basis. And once again, the more we practice, the better we will become. So I would encourage all of our viewers today to be sure and look into this through our book, read it carefully, and then just start slowly and move into a situation where fasting really does become part of your spiritual journey.
Thank you.